Is that correct? Is that strict? Did he say?
Yeah, it's. I use the analogy of my sister, but with her fascination she had with manga animated movies, those Japanese adult cartoon movies.
Yeah.
She used to read the subtitles,
Yeah.
and she had a friend who was Japanese who sat down and watched one of her shows, and the Japanese friend said those subtitles are terrible. She said, "What do you mean?" She says, "Oh," and then she translated with a bit more care with what the character just said.
Yeah.
And
Totally different.
Rebecca, my sister, just went, "Wow." So she started learning Japanese. And why is she learning Japanese? Because she wants to get closer to finding out what these movies are about. Not because it's legalistic, oh, I might go to hell. She just wanted to find out more about what was being said. No one would ever in a million years accuse my sister of being legalistic because she wanted to learn Japanese so she could find out exactly. Because if you know a language, you know a foreign language, and you watch the subtitles they put up, it's bare bones. They just give you the bare bones.
Yeah.
You know, the character will say, I love you like the wind blowing on my face on a beautiful day, and the subtitles just say, I love you. You know, there's nothing, they don't give you anything.
Well, even in one of the prayers that we do, I wrote it because my Siddur hasn't got the transliteration, so I transliterated it myself. But I prefer that because most of the transliteration don't use Sephardic. They use Ashkenazi, which is a bit confusing because it doesn't follow the vowel markings exactly. Like instead of saying va-ed, it will say vo-ed. It will change the A to an O and it changes the T to an S. Like they don't say Shabbat, they say Shabbos. The T at the end is an S. Yeah. And I thought that's a bit confusing because the letter's a T but you say S. And that's going to be confusing, but you stick to Sephardi, which is more common in the Middle East because the Ashkenazi is more from the German, right? Comes from the German.
So what's the basis of all of this?
Well, initially he was using a bit of Ashkenazi, but generally we're slowly changing things so that it follows more the Sephardi. Which,
I learned on Ashkenazi store. I don't know any better.
yeah, that's right. So like
Which is the most widely used?
Ashkenazi.
Is it?
Australia.
yeah, but
anyway,
see,
anyway.
well, in the Middle East it's not, say, because
Australia.
you know, Sephardi is in the Middle East,
Yeah.
in Spain and that. It just
Yeah.
depends. But what you find is most of the books written are written by Ashkenazis. You don't see too many Sephardi books, which is a bit confusing. And so therefore, I'm glad because I've got a Siddur that hasn't got transliteration because then I can transliterate it myself because I know the vowel points, and otherwise I'll be confused with Ashkenazi. So then I'll look through here and I'll have a look at if you just the little bit of vowel markings you know. See, that's a vav with that stroke under it, which means va, and he's got vo.
Yeah.
See, but it should be va, and the ayin isn't spoken, but the vowel marking under it is 3 dots, which is an e, and that's a dalet, meaning a d, basically, right? So it's va-ed, but it says vo-ed, which is like an accent, you could say. Like, you know, you have different accents in that. But that can be a bit confusing if they don't change the vowel markings. So it'd be okay to say, all right, we're going to speak Ashkenazi, but then we've got to change all the vowel markings. But they haven't. They're using the Sephardic vowel markings and then they're transliterating it into Ashkenazi, which is a bit confusing. And that's why I'm teaching Sephardic, because I know that this is an A. I'm not going to say it as an O. It's an A. And that's the Sephardi way. And I prefer to use the system that they use in Israel rather than the system that comes from outside of Israel.
Yeah. Is everybody here or are they gone?
No, they're all sitting out there. There was another guy who came last week as well with his son, but his daughter's out there too.
No, they've left now.
Oh, they left?
Yeah.
I thought they were going to stay.
Yeah, I think he might come back. I think he said he might turn up. But he's really here to see if Giordano's here.
Yeah, I know.
I said he hasn't Giordano's a minute.
You're not going to see him ever.
Yeah, no, he hasn't been here for a while. I hopefully we'll see. All right, I'll get the girls in.
Okay.
So, yeah, we are. I just started to hit the broadcast button about 5 minutes ago. Sorry, I should have told you. It's not aiming at you guys. You're not on camera.
Okay, that's all right then. Well, then I learned something. Well, that's why it's the old story. No matter where you are, you're gonna be careful what you speak. Because he could have turned the camera on and
Yeah.
if I said anything. But it's good to speak right, but, you know. But so, I mean, because we say prayers, I felt, well, you've got to know what you're saying, word for word. And when you do, then you actually, you like it, because sometimes the transliteration is not quite right. Like example, one of the prayers I was talking about, its transliteration says, it talks about Yahweh, it says, he brings the wind and the rain. But the literal translation says that he brings the wind to bring down the rain. So he uses the wind to bring down the rain, you know. So they're combined, they're not like separate. But in the translation, it's like he brings wind and the rain. It's actually a combination. He brings the wind to bring the rain, you could say. It's like sort of saying, well, we get an easterly wind and it brings clouds. Whereas a westerly wind brings dryness, you know, like that. Simple thing, but that's how you can get translation. Not quite right. You know, and that's what I like to see. And many times, even when I'm using that resource that I use, which is great, but then often I want to check that the translation is right. And sometimes it's completely wrong because they're trying to fit in with the English translation. And so that's not right.
So I won't close you. Notice that what happened with my
See, like when you read the scriptures of Yitro, you would never think when it says, and the next day, you wouldn't think it's Yom Kippur.
Yeah, I know.
See, and that's something you can only get, like his version actually said it's Yom Kippur.
Well, welcome back, everybody. Shabbat Shalom. Thank you for coming back. Is this mic on?
It should be on, just check it again. You didn't turn it off up there?
Oh, it might be up here. 1, 2, 1, 2. No, it's not on.
That's better. What did you do?
Nothing. You're the one who did it, you moved it.
Oh, okay. Is it a bit? Okay.
Must be a bit touchy.
All right. Welcome back. Today's teaching is, well, the Kippah. It is the religious headwear normally associated with Jewish men. And I've spent the last week, probably last 2 weeks, because I was going to do it a week prior. So I've had about 2 weeks where I've just been slowly sort of plodding along, and up until the last 2 or 3 days, I've been going like there's no tomorrow, trying to find anything and everything I can about the Kippah, or the yarmulke as they call it in Yiddish. And one of the things I've found is that there doesn't seem to be any sort of series of definitive teachings on the male head covering. If you have a look on YouTube, you'll find there's quite a few short 5-minute videos, 1 to 5 minute videos. Maybe you get a 10-minute or a 16-minute one, but you won't really find any full lectures. I did come across a series of videos from Hatikva Ministries. I think the gentleman that presides over that ministry is Joseph Hope, and I was very impressed with his lectures, and he has quite a few that focus exclusively on the Kippah and 1 Corinthians 11, which is the infamous passage where Rav Shaul speaks about a man praying with his head covered. And we're going to look at that today. And I was very impressed with this guy's research He wasn't a professional theologian or I don't know if he was a Greek scholar. He did say he wasn't I know that he's not a Greek scholar, but I don't know if he was a Hebrew scholar, but he certainly sounded like he was. And I just like the manner. So if time permits, I do have a short lecture from him that I want to put up there that you guys can watch. And I encourage you to watch anything from this man regarding the Kippah. Having said that, I think there's still a few videos on the head covering that he's put out that I haven't watched yet, so I shouldn't say anything, but what I've watched of his stuff so far, it's really, really good. So perhaps there's no other article of attire more debated over than the head covering for Messianic men. There's really no other debate or topic that's hotter than that. And what you will see is you'll see that people that are pro-Kippah and people that are anti-Kippah. You won't see people kind of that are just like, oh, I don't mind, I'll put one on, or I won't wear one. Either it's no, we shouldn't wear one, or yep, you should wear one. There are people in between, there are people a little bit more laid back, but most of the time, Messianic men will go, no, you don't have to wear a kippah. I don't want to wear a kippah. And so what I did is I've churned over the issue so much that I've basically come up with 4 major reasons why Messianic men will not wear a kippah, will not wear a spherical piece of cloth on the top of their head. And reason number 1 is that its absence as a direct command outside the priesthood. So in short, we're not commanded to wear them. That's probably reason number 1. The next one is that it's supposed criticism by Rav Shul in 1 Corinthians 11, verses 4 to 12. That's a big one. And I'm sure if Shaul was privy to how that part of his letter to the congregation in Corinth was interpreted, he would roll in his grave. The third most common negative reception that the concept of the kippah comes under is it's Jewish. So you'll get some Messianic men say, well, I don't want to wear it because it's Jewish. And I'm going to look at all these. I'm going to look at all these points, these 4 major objections, or I'm going to look at them all and examine them all one at a time later on in the lecture. And number 4, it's a tradition, and generally traditions are rejected because many Messianics think that Yeshua rejected just about every Jewish tradition that ever existed, which we know isn't true. So there you have it. They're the 4 major objections to a Messianic man wearing a kippah. So the issue of the kippah, when you put it under the microscope, you know what? This is it. The issue when you put the subject of whether a Messianic man should wear a kippah or not, when you put it under the microscope, the issue is simply down to the reservation of being associated with the Jews.
That's right.
That's stripping everything away and just giving you the truth. It's a reservation. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're anti-Semitic. It doesn't mean that. You may really love the Jews, and there's 2 reasons, other than anti-Semitism, that you may have that feeling that it's Jewish. Number 1 is, you might hold the Jew on such a high pedestal compared to yourself, that by you wearing a kippah in public and looking to other people like you're a Jew, insults the Jews. So that might be a reason why you're not comfortable wearing in public. And that's a reason that I can identify with, that I sympathize with. Another reason is that you because it's Jewish, you say, oh, I don't want to wear a kippah because it's Jewish, not because you're anti-Semitic, but because you might love the Jews, or you might not be sure about them, but you know one thing for sure, a lot of people don't like them.
That's right.
And if you wear one, you put yourself in the firing line, and not only you, but your family and your friends and your relatives, your livelihood could become in trouble, because imagine you decide to put on the kippah the next day and turn up to your work and you find out, oh lo and behold, my boss is an anti-Semite. And I've invited him to Christmas barbecues or Hanukkah barbecues and functions and parties all these years, and he's been a friend of the family, and it's not until I put a kippah on my head I found out that my boss, who was a family friend, is anti-Semitic. Not just anti-Semitic, but ragingly anti-Semitic. So there are the two other reasons, apart from just plain old anti-Semitism, that you may have when you respond with, it's Jewish. Okay? There is no serious debate within Christianity over a Christian male wearing something on their head. There is no serious theological debate whether a Christian male can wear a baseball cap, or a bowler hat, or a slouch hat, or anything. There's no debate.
Doesn't matter.
There's no debate.
As long as it comes.
If you find yourself at Bible study, at a Christian Bible study in someone's house, and you turn up with a baseball bat and you leave that baseball bat on throughout the entire study, and at the end you get asked to conclude the study in a word of prayer, they aren't going to ask you to remove your baseball cap. That's not even going to come up in their minds.
40 years ago, we were Joseph.
Yeah, I'm going to get to that.
But if you wore a kippah, they might be asking you questions.
I'm glad you're here. I'm glad. Right. Now, just want to show you this. Oh, that's
a
a-
beautiful hat.
That's me going through the slides, not getting the timing right, so just bear with me. Early church fathers. The early church fathers, I'm talking about, remember when you were in Christianity and you would study sometimes some of the early greats. All of them wore head coverings.
Yeah.
And if you have any depictions from illustrators of early church fathers without some sort of headwear on, then when they would go into prayer, or when they would officiate in ancient Christian rituals, they would don the head with some sort of garb. Early church fathers wore some sort of head covering, whether it was a turban or some sort of religious hat. The custom to remove hats indoors or at cemeteries came from an ancient tradition of taking off the helmet when no danger is at hand. So a man takes off his hat to show that he dares stand unarmed in someone else's presence. So knights removed their helmets in the presence of a king as a display of vulnerability and trust that the king would not kill them. Knights also removed helmets in church as an expression of security in one's sanctity. In modern society and in Christendom, to pay respects to somebody at a gravesite, you would take off your hat and put it in your hands.
Yeah.
And in Judaism, it's complete opposite. When you pay your respects, you actually have something on your head.
Yeah.
You can't go into a yeshiva in Israel or anywhere in the world if it's a decent yeshiva unless you have your head covering. You can't go to the Wailing Wall and pray unless your head is covered. If you're a vagrant or somebody who's really off the wall and you wander into a yeshiva, you would put your back of your hand over the back of your head if you wanted to not be thrown out by the students. They would tolerate you for long enough it would take for them to give you like a temporary kippah to wear on your head to go and speak to whoever you have to speak to.
Like when we had a visitor, this Jewish guy who wasn't religious at all.
Yes.
The first thing he asked for was a kippah.
Yep. Yeah, we had Vikul when Vikul first came here. He came here for a Hanukkah party, and as soon as he could, he asked somebody for a kippah because he felt undressed, slightly underdressed without a kippah on him. As soon as you put a kippah on his head, he was fine. All right. I want you to have a look at this next slide very closely.
Had
a lot of
hats on.
It's
Melbourne Cup.
Melbourne Cup 1900. Melbourne Cup 1900. You'll probably
It's
notice
still fashionable.
that headwear, some form of headwear, whether it be a bonnet for women or a hat for men, was common practice. Tell me if you can see a bare head anywhere in that crowd.
I don't think
No,
there
no.
is.
This is another photo, 1930s Melbourne Cup.
The king's horses.
See how all the men are wearing caps?
Yeah. Only nowadays.
A couple. There's a couple.
It was always a sign.
Just a couple.
Respect.
In 1930s, attendees at the Melbourne Cup are mostly wearing hats. In fact, in most parts of the world, some sort of headwear up until the late 50s was simply considered a normal part of any attire, whether formal or informal.
That's right.
Traditionally, all US president-elects wore top hats to their inauguration ceremonies. Though some wore the less ostentatious Hamburg hat, it wasn't until John F. Kennedy's inauguration in 1961 that the tradition ceased after he discarded his top hat during the course of the day. So as you can see, he's turning up to the inauguration with the top hat on, and then he sits, takes the top hat off, puts it in his lap, and then he goes up to do his speech without the top hat anymore. From that day on, top hats at inaugurations finished. They were kaput. And almost like that had such a great influence on the Western world, hats from after that day onward became less and less a part of men's daily attire. So you can probably thank JFK for hats all of a sudden not becoming fashionable anymore.
I always wear it.
Interesting.
Didn't know that.
Yeah.
My kids used to think I was born with one.
The military hat is referred to as a cover, and it is never called a hat. There are specific military cover etiquettes that applies to various situations indoors and outdoors. When being saluted, when at a funeral, and when flying in military aircraft. If you are in the military, it is crucial that you follow these etiquette procedures regarding your cover. Etiquette in the military is not just a guideline, but it is an act of respect to those around you and to the military in general. Whenever you are covered and someone salutes you, or you see an officer of a high rank, it is proper etiquette to salute him. In the military, it is considered poor etiquette if you salute someone while they are uncovered. This means that whenever you are in a situation where you're uncovered, such as being indoors, you should not salute someone, even if they are a higher rank than you. Instead, you should simply greet the person with "Good afternoon, ma'am," or "Good morning, sir." A little thing called a misnefet is a helmet covering for the infantry helmet used in the IDF, and it came into vogue around 1994. It is a considerably larger than the helmet, giving the impression of a militarized chef's hat. The purpose of the floppy helmet cover is to break up the distinctive outline of the helmet head and thus assist in camouflage of the wearer. It was originally adopted in the 1990s for guerrilla warfare in the wood and bushlands south of Lebanon, later adding a two-sided camo for one desert and for one woodland terrain, so you can turn it inside out. It's got camo on the inside and desert terrain on the other side. Mesnefet is easily removable and can be attached to the helmet while folded. There are a few people who actually study the history of the Jews during the diaspora and all the restrictions and laws that were imposed upon them by various nations and communities. For example, during the medieval times, they were forced to wear pointy hats to distinguish them from Goyim. These were actually forced on the Jews, like the Star of David were forced on the Jews during the Holocaust. Every Jew was to wear a distinctive pointy hat.
Yeah.
This still is from a 1920s horror film called The Golem, in which based off a legend, or I believe it's got some truth in it, about a rabbi called Rabbi Lowe in the village of Prague, or in the city of Prague, and his little community in the city of Prague became threatened, and they were going to cause a pogrom and burn down their community and kill everybody. And so he made a man out of clay called a golem, and he gave the golem life, and he turned into a very powerful man, and he protected the community and saved them from being destroyed. And then he dismantled the golem, and that's what the movie's based off. And in the film, it's black and white, and it's a silent film, so you have music running, and it has stills with writing in it. And when you see town meetings with the Jews talking and discussing what they're going to do about the pogrom, the impending pogrom, they've all got pointy hats. And Rabbi Lowe himself, he's got a pointy hat, and he wears all these robes, and guess what he looks like?
Gandalf.
He looks like a magician.
Yeah, there's Gandalf.
It looks like Gandalf.
But I'm getting ahead of myself here.
Who is it?
In medieval times, the Jews were forced to wear pointy hats to distinguish them from the Gentiles of the host nations. The head apparel of a person supposedly incapable of learning is called a dunce hat, perhaps originated from this era. The term dunce itself comes from John Dunce Scotus, who was a 14th century philosopher. When the 16th century ushered in the new learning perspective of the English Renaissance period, John's followers opposed it, thereby associating the term dunce with one who was incapable of or unwilling to learn. But if you trace that's him there, that's the philosopher. But if you trace the actual shape of the hat and the hat being put on as a form of humiliation, it traces back to how the Jews were treated by some of their rougher host nations. The classic imagery of the pointy hat wearing magician or wizard hunched over a pile of dusty books with chemicals bubbling away in the background originated from the appearance of the typical medieval Jewish sage. Their flowing robe, long white beard, constant proximity to scrolls and ointments, incenses and trinkets form the basis of the popular look as such fantasy characters as J.R.R. Tolkien's Gandalf the Grey and J.K. Rowling's wizard headmaster Dumbledore. So whenever you see a classic image of a wizard or a magician, they are based off the rabbis in the medieval era of the Jews. And they would be sitting in like bricked off urban places in bricked off rooms, and they'd be studying haunched over scrolls with incense burning away, and they would often be able to do certain things that people would equate with magic. Saint Joseph is shown wearing a Juden hat. That's the German word for the hat. In a 12th century German nativity scene, whilst Jesus is shown in one on the road to Emmaus, and quite a few etchings, paintings from the same era. 5th century painting in Roman catacombs also shows Jesus using a wand to raise Lazarus from the dead. So what happened was the magic wand came about by the incident when Yeshua was in the synagogue and he was reading from the Torah scroll, and when you read the Torah scroll in the synagogue you have a pointer, and it was like a long stick with a hand on the end pointing, and you would run through and you'd read the Torah scroll. Then the demon in the community began to manifest in one of the members in the synagogue, and then Yeshua, when he was rebuking it, he was pointing the Torah pointer at the demon and he casted out the demon. So onlookers thought that Torah pointer had power, and so from there that's where the magic wand comes from. So when next time you watch Harry Potter, I'm not sure you guys are going to rush off and watch Harry Potter, but when the magic wand actually originated from the Torah pointer that's used in the synagogue by the Jews.
So it's the Torah point that became the magic one. Interesting.
While there's no direct command in the Torah to wear a particular head covering for common Israelite, the talit, the four-cornered garment from which the tzitzit are tied, was used entirely to enwrap a person to provide privacy in large gatherings during the talit. That's why if somebody's considering getting a talit, I always say get as big a one as you can. Don't you get some Jews in Hollywood when they get married, they're not observant. They'll get like a talit that's about this wide and they'll wear it around their neck like a scarf.
Yeah.
You don't want to get one like that. You want to get one that you can at least wrap yourself in and have some privacy. Essentially, the talit is a private prayer closet. So when Yeshua speaks about going into your closet, he's speaking about wrapping yourself up in your talit. And the scriptures actually attest to frequent wrapping yourself in a talit combats depression. So when you pray, you go and gather yourself up in your talit. I remember a story my rabbi once told me. He was having a particularly bad time and he would wrap himself up in his talit and go to sleep in it. When a Jewish boy is old enough to have his hair cut, I think when they're hit their when they hit the age of 4, ceremonially they're taken and they're wrapped up in their father's talit. They're completely wrapped up in their father's talit, and they're taken to get their hair cut. So it's interesting that the talit is become associated as being like a magical garment. Have you ever noticed why Superman has a cape,
Mm.
or Batman has a cape. Have you ever noticed why superheroes have a cape, have a mantle? It all goes back to the tallit worn by the Jew. Because you would pull the tallit off, and you'd flick the tallit at a person and it could kill them or it could heal them. You just twirl the tallit around and everybody all of a sudden hits the ground and they don't get up again.
What was
Or you
Elijah's
can-
mantle, Jason?
Sorry?
What was Elijah's
It was a
mantle?
tallit.
Right.
Absolutely 100% a tallit. And the tallits were usually passed from one student to another. There was a person here that I considered my student. I asked him if he wanted my one and went no. So that's all right. I wasn't offended. I've still got it actually. I'm glad I didn't let go of it. Elijah's mantle was definitely a tallit. To answer your question, yes.
The double blessing came. That's right. The double blessing.
Jesus, what most people call Jesus, is often depicted as wearing a tallit, with it often pulled up, covering the back of his head. The head covering is part of the tallit, which foreshadows the heavenly garment all members of the Commonwealth of Israel will receive in the new kingdom. Adam and Hava were not naked before the fall, as we perceive someone to be naked today. They were clad in a heavenly covering, a glow, a glory, and it shone from them, and that was their garment. To be fully attired, whether in the glory light or in conventional clothes, always included their head being attired. So when they were in their glory covering, the glory covering covered the head as well as their body. Whether they wore foreign objects, snake skins after they were judged and they were cast out of Eden, you can bet your bottom dollar that the clothes that Yahweh made them consisted of some form of headwear for both of them. For a person to be fully clothed properly, they should be wearing something on their head. It's not until recent times we've walked around bareheaded even in the sun, and we're actually, technically speaking, we're not fully attired. We're like half undressed. And this is without even getting into whether the Torah is a commandment or not. And with those earlier slides that I showed you of the Melbourne Cup, all those people that you saw in that picture are probably not Jewish. And all of them are wearing head coverings. If I'd showed you a photo from the 1920s of the beach, you would see all the women who are not Jewish or Torah observant at all, and they'd all be clad in a bathing suit from their neck down to the ends of their legs and their wrists. There were women back in those days with a gun to their head. If you forced them to wear the bikinis that the women are wearing today, if you told them they had to wear that in public or you would shoot them dead, they would prefer to be shot dead than to wear some of the bikinis that women are wearing today. If you just go back 100 years, not even that, maybe 60 years, a woman would rather be killed than have to wear what they're wearing today and parading around on the beach today. Thankfully, my kids aren't really into the beach. So when I went up to see them in Queensland, we didn't go to the beach. I mean, I like the beach, don't get me wrong. But it's not a good place, it's not a comfortable place for a man to be. Let's talk about Yeshua. Few people know in Scripture that Scripture itself attests to Yeshua's own practice of wearing a head covering. Notice something interesting with this exchange between Hasatan and Yeshua in this passage from the Baal Shem Tov manuscript of Matthew. In Matthew 4:9 it says, "And he," that is Hasatan, "said to him," that is Yeshua, "all these things I will give you if you fall down and worship me and bear your head to me." And that is, I can see you all flicking through your scriptures to see if you've got it. I can guarantee you do not have that in your scriptures.
Yeah, they leave that bit off.
Yep. And while we're on the subject of Hasatan, trying to tempt our Messiah to bear his head, there's something that we have to get our heads around, no pun intended, when we look at the subject of covering one's own head. Hasatan's fatal injury principally occurs where? What part of his anatomy? When the Hasatan, the accuser, gets the fatal blow, Where does Scripture say that the fatal blow occurs?
Oh, on his head. Tread on his head. Tread on.
King David struck Goliath by hitting him in the skull, the Golgotha, the Gilgullet. So victory came to David at the place of the skull. And victory came to King Messiah Yeshua also at the place of the skull. What is the place of the skull? It is the place where they believe the skull of Adam, the first man, was buried. A Messianic who wears a kippah on his head has a special type of attachment to our Messiah, because the place of the skull is the place of our first victory. And by wearing an unobtrusive spherical cloth on the back of one's head, which enables you to go into a bank without taking it off, you can go into an RSL without taking it off. If you go into an RSL or a bank with a hat on, I guarantee you, an RSL, they'll tell you to take your hat off.
That's right.
You can't go into an RSL
With that.
or a leagues club with a hat on. You can't. But if you've got a kippah on the back of your head, which is flush type of, if I wear a baseball cap, you don't know who I am. If I wear like a slouch hat or something, you don't know who I am. You know.
Can you wear it on a passport photograph?
Yeah, you can. Particularly one like Tom, they won't ask you to take it off. But if it comes over the front, they might ask you to take it off.
Yeah.
I don't know actually. I have to look into that to tell you the truth. Here. I don't know, but I would think not one like Tom's on mine. You can't even see it. Look, you can't even see my kippah. Right?
If you took a straight shot, it'd be hard to see.
Yeah. Like a person taking a passport photo of you, or somebody who works in a club, they feel too uncomfortable to ask you to remove a religious item off their head. They wouldn't have the guts to do it. Not in this day and age, no way. So, when we wear a kippah, it reminds us of where the first victory occurred, which was the place of the skull. Why is that so significant that a victory occurred at Golgotha or Gilgullet? I'll tell you why. Because the hardest thing you're ever going to control, you're ever going to come up against in the rest of your life, is not going to be somebody who doesn't like you, is not going to be somebody from outside of you. It's going to be one thing and one thing only. Controlling what you think.
No, the battle of the mind.
If you are blessed to make it to a nursing home at a ripe old age of 80 or 90, it'll still be a struggle for you then. The evil inclination never departs from you. If Yahweh loves you, He won't allow the evil inclination to depart from you. Now, you can overcome the evil inclination so you'll feel like it's not there. But if He removes the evil inclination from you, He's removing the potential for your reward. I've sometimes felt so broken that I've asked the Heavenly Father to remove from me the compulsion that I have to do a particular array of sins. But if I do that, if He does that, then I'm going to remove the reward from I'm not going to receive any reward. I'm not going to be judged in any favour. And you know you can actually do it in this day and age, and I'll tell you how, but don't you dare go and do it, because you're going to remove your reward. You go and get hypnotised. I'm fair dinkum. You go and get hypnotised. But in doing that, you'll remove your reward. I'm not saying you'll go to hell, but you'll remove your reward. Because the idea is that we are put here to be tested. Remember the verses that we read earlier today? It says in James, and it says, do not be upset if you're being tested, but rather be joyful. So it's up to you. It's up to you to choose what to think from moment to moment. And when you choose to think thoughts that are in line with Messiah, you have a victory. You win the victory at the place of the skull. if you wear a kippah on your head, you become conscious of all of these things that I'm telling you. 100%, 24 hours a day. If you wear it out in public, you've got this on the back of your head, you will be more conscious of who you are in Messiah being an Israelite. If you choose to go with your head uncovered, which I know not everybody's confident to wear a kippah all the time. I don't wear my kippah all the time. I don't wear it at work. I usually wear a hat or something. I will guarantee you it'll begin to help you in your life as you strive to become more like Yeshua. The more you choose to wear your zizi, the more you choose to wear a kippah, the more your life's going to get better. And the kippah is not a commandment. And I am here to tell you today that all the more should one be compelled to wear a kippah because it isn't a commandment. Because if it became a commandment, then it would be diminishing the reward. It's like when you learn Hebrew, it's not a command to learn Hebrew. But when you just naturally want to learn Hebrew, it tells me a lot about your relationship with Heavenly Father. It tells me a lot about how much you love Him and how much you want to find out about His ways and Messiah's ways. Anybody that wants to learn the Hebrew language, anybody that wants to learn about Jewish culture, particularly 1st and 2nd century Jewish culture, that's somebody who really wants to get to the bottom about who Messiah was. That's somebody who really wants to get to the bottom of who Yahweh is, who created the world through Yeshua. And so that's why when everybody says, well, that's not Jewish, that's not Jewish, that's too Jewish, or I don't want to learn Hebrew, you don't have to learn Hebrew, that's not a salvation issue. That's true, and yes, that is Jewish, but what's your motive? Why are you saying this? Why are you going for a discount? Why are we going for these discounts? People want a discount. What's the quickest way and what's the easiest way to obtain salvation? What's the least I have to do to please my Heavenly Father? That's a terrible attitude.
Yeah,
What's the least I have to do here on Shabbat every week? Ian? I turn up, Tom does the liturgy, hey, Shabbat Shalom, see you later, out you go, don't let the door hit you on the way out. Yeah, no one's going to buy that. Like we were saying before earlier today, if you're going to serve Yahweh, serve Him with joy. Serve Him with a smile on your face, even if you're going through 20 different trials. Try and have not a laugh about it, but try and smile and be joyful about it. Because these trials build character, and character builds integrity, and integrity builds endurance. And once you've got endurance and it's made its home in you, you can pretty much take on just about anything. You begin to learn the type of man David was. That's a man that had endurance. Yeah, I tell you, he had no room left in his back that didn't have a knife in it. Not a spot without a knife in it. But he kept going. He lived to a ripe old age. Well, he lived till he was 73. All right, so let's go and address these 4 major objections against the kippah, shall we? Oh, that's Corinthians 11. I won't look at that just yet. Okay, so first one, there is no direct command for men in general to wear a head covering. Answer. Remember, technically speaking, there is no direct command in the Torah to even pray. There is no direct command in the Torah to even pray. We see Abraham speaking with Yahweh, but there is no command to pray. Secondly, the priesthood is instructed to wear head coverings, and Israel are instructed to be a nation of priests according to Exodus 19:6, when it says, "You will be for me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation." Just like the Kohanim who perform their sacred duties and work together with the high priest in the temple, all believers are called to be priests, walking in one accord under the headship of Messiah. 1 Peter 2 verse 5 says, "You also as lively stones are built up in a spiritual house, a kadosh priesthood, a set-apart priesthood to offer up spiritual sacrifices acceptable to Yahweh by Yeshua HaMashiach, our Messiah." 1 Peter 2 and 5. The Kohanim were instructed to wear a headdress that wasn't as lavish as the Kohen HaGadol, as the high priest. So too, we who don't preside and officiate in the temple, we're to be attired in a similar way. In fact, some of the research, the new research that's come to light in the last 10 years, you really see how it makes sense with the custom of the kippah being something that was worn since the very beginning rather than coming about in the 2nd century. Because after Yahweh gave the rules and regulations for the Mishkan and how the priests were to be attired, don't you think that the nation of Israel, the rest of the nation of Israel would have paid very close attention to how the priests were dressed? It stands to reason that the nation of Israel, whilst they're in the desert, they had good periods with their Heavenly Father as well as bad periods. And they were not dumb people. And they would have been able to work out, this is how Yahweh commands the priesthood to be dressed. Okay, let's work back from that. And so if the priests in the Mishkan were instructed to wear coverings on their heads, then it stands to reason the most logic-thinking Israelites in the desert would have gone, okay, well, it's probably good that we put something on our heads. It's just common sense. Furthermore, if the Kohanim were instructed to wear less distinctive headwear than the Kohen HaGadol, how much more should we cover our own heads as a nation of priests who are all part of the body, whose high priest is now crowned and glorified Messiah Yeshua? So we can deduce, while the articles of regular clothing do not have to be copies of what the Kohanim wore, the number of articles of clothing should not be diminished. So you look at a Kohen and you say, okay, he's got to have a sash, he's got to have like a tunic, he's got to wear pants, he's got to wear shoes, he's got to wear something on his head. Who are we to say, okay, we won't add the tunic? We'll attire ourselves similarly as the high priests do with the number of articles of clothing, but we'll take one away. You know, let's not wear the pants, let's not wear the shoes. You know, it just stands to reason. Yahweh numbers the article of clothing that are acceptable for people to actually officiate near his presence. Put up your hand if you want to be near Yahweh on good terms. Is that, like, that's a pretty safe bet. I want to be nearest to Yahweh as I possibly be on good terms. Okay, a logic-thinking person sees how the Mishkan is constructed, what times the Mishkan is in operation, how you're meant to be attired and what you're meant to be able to be doing in that Mishkan, and you function accordingly on a daily basis how the priests did in the Mishkan. When is the best time to pray? When the first offering was brought in the Mishkan. In the morning, between 7 and 11 o'clock. And so when is the best time to pray? In the afternoon, when the second offering got brought. So you pray in sequence with when the offerings were brought. And if you're fasting, the fat that is burning, the fat that it gets eaten up because you're fasting, because when you fast, it causes your excess fat to be consumed. It's like the fat that's being consumed on the altar from the animals. So do you see what I'm saying? You bring all these and you apply these. May my arms be accepted like the daily offering. Go and put your arms in the air for a minute and see how sore it gets. When you're at home praying, hey, here's an idea. How about you stick your arms in the air? You might think you look like a bit of an idiot, but you do that for like 5 minutes. It starts to hurt. But what you're doing is you're putting your body like an antenna. You know what an antenna is on a radio? You've got to put the antenna to get better reception. I'm not flagellating myself, but I'm putting my stance and my body in a way that's crying out for attention and help. Are you gonna believe me if I sit down like this and I go, I really need your help? Oh, what's that there? Yeah, I really need your help. What's that? Oh, that's interesting. You're not going to believe me. So your whole body should come into line with how you're feeling and what you want to share with the Almighty. All right, so let's look at criticism number 2, which is Shaul's apparent criticism of head coverings in men. So I'll get you to open your scriptures up to 1 Corinthians 11 and start at maybe verse 4.
That should be easy.
1 Corinthians 11, verse 4.
What verse?
Verse 4. going to have to go to the contents page because these scriptures, these are the old ones with the transliteration. Corinthian Aleph,
Yeah.
1106. Just bear with me, sorry.
Aleph.
1106. There we go. Okay, so 1 Corinthians 11, verse 4. I'm going to start from just the first verse. Do you mind? So 1 Corinthians 11, verse 1. This is Shaul speaking to the congregation at Corinth. Become imitators of me, I also am of Mashiach. I praise you, brothers, that you remember me in every way and keep the traditions as I delivered them to you. Oh my gosh. There's that word. Did you spot that?
Keep the tradition, not throw them
Verse 2. I praise you, brothers, that you remember me in every way and keep the traditions as I delivered them to you. In other words, keep the halakha.
Yeah.
Did he make up new halakha since he converted? No. He's talking about the Jewish traditions of his day. Keep the halakha that I taught you. I'm telling you one thing. If he wants to be effective in Mashiach, going to his own people of his own nation, because the word tells us to go to the Jew first, right?
Mm-hmm.
If he wants to be effective in his ministry, then he's going to not want to change any halakha at all if he can. And when you're a full follower of King Messiah Yeshua, apart from Pharisees, leading Pharisees in Yeshua's day, venerating man-made traditions over commands, and in some cases completely ignoring some major commands, most of first century Judaism was pretty much on the money in terms of how Yeshua expected a person to live. And so Shaul is trying to teach these synagogues in cities that will have him how to live now as a Jew, but now embracing the prophet that was earmarked or spoken about by the Navaim, the Mashiach that was spoken about by the prophets, the Navaim in the Tanakh. This was his challenge, to try and get people to see that this is the guy that just was killed and resurrected and ascended. This was the guy. I need to try and prove to this Orthodox Jewish congregation in the diaspora, in a foreign town, convinced that this is the guy that's spoken about by the prophets. Do you realize that's a tall order? That's not just a guest speaker coming in and talking about morning conduct. That's a guy having to come in and turn everything on its head. He's not teaching anything that they have to change their ways, really, but he's just saying, guess what? The prophet, the Messiah spoken about by the prophets, oh, by the way, he came last year. Did you know that? And I'm going to prove it to you now by giving you drushes, and that's what Shaul was doing. And the congregation, the synagogue, would either accept him or they'd boot him out. So did they boot him out? Yeah, they booted him out sometimes. Do you remember that? He got booted out of one synagogue, and a guy opened up another synagogue next door during his ministry and said, okay, we'll be happy with you teaching here about Messiah. But the main synagogue that he turned up to in the city, they booted him out. And so a lot of time he's teaching in homes, he's teaching in apartments, he's teaching on riverbanks where the women are immersing themselves for their family purity laws and things. Okay, let's keep reading. I wish you to know that the head of every man is Messiah. Now straight away, as soon as he says that, he's speaking symbolically. So he says, the head of every man, is my head Messiah? No, it's me. It's Jason. It's not Messiah's head on my body, it's my head. But he's saying the head of every man is Messiah. So now he's setting up that he's speaking symbolically. He's not speaking literally. Okay, so he's speaking about hierarchy. I wish that you know that the head of every man is Messiah. You ready? And the head of every woman is a man. And the head of Messiah is Elohim. So he's speaking about a hierarchy, isn't he? He's speaking that the head of every man is Messiah. The head of Messiah is Yahweh. And the head of a woman is her man. That's the hierarchy. Now, is the man obligated to pray 3 times a day? Yes. Is the woman obligated to pray 3 times a day? No. Is it good for the woman to pray 3 times a day? Yes. but she's under no obligation. Why? Because a woman usually has kids, and there's one thing about kids that's a common trait.
Okay.
They have no concept of time. Kids have no concept of time. They have no concept of the money that you spend to look after them. They have no concept of electricity bills. They just come home and they expect that their lights to be on. They expect that their food to be cooked and warmed in an oven. Kids don't have a concept of time, money. They don't have a concept. So the mother's role is usually looking after the kids, and they can be uncontrollable at times. They can be a handful. So the woman, a Jewish woman or a Nazarene Israelite woman, or a Messianic woman who's keeping the Torah, if she's married and has children, she is under no obligation to front and center 3 times a day for prayer. Her obligation is to be with the children. Who's meant to pray? The husband. Because the husband is the head of the woman. So the husband, when he prays, guess what? The woman's also there as well. So whatever the merit the husband accrues through righteous prayer, guess what? His wife gets exactly the same merit. You could argue she gets more. You could argue that she gets more. How can you argue that she gets more? Because if she's a good woman, she's letting the man go about studying the Torah as much as he can. And being at synagogue and learning and praying and doing all the things that you can do. In a perfect environment, you don't have to make your way in your own livelihood. You can study the Torah 24/7. That's why the children of Israel didn't want to come out of the desert in, because they didn't have to forage for food. They didn't have to clothe themselves because their clothes never wore out. They didn't have to have shoemakers in their community because their shoes never wore out. And if they ate on manna, they never had to go to the toilet.
Wonderful.
And as soon as they went into the land,
Perfect life.
and as soon as they went into land, oh, by the way, now we've got to actually till the land. Now we have to get used to using toilets again. Now we have to get our own food. That's not sounding like such a good deal anymore. I think we're happy to stay out in the desert with the pillar of cloud by day and the pillar of fire by night, and the beautiful Mishkan with all the waterfalls flowing around it in the middle. It's relaxing to hear those waterfalls at night, and the 7 clouds of glory surrounding us and keeping us in an air-conditioned environment like the one we're in now. I don't think I really want to go to a land-flying milk home. I'm happy to stay out in the desert, where I could just study Torah 24/7. Did you know children that were born in the desert thought the manna was a natural occurrence? And when the manna stopped, they thought it was the end of the world? Because they were born in the desert, seeing manna fall every day and twice as much on Friday.
That's right.
And then when the manna stopped, they said, how are we going to eat?
Yeah.
We can't eat food anymore. What are we going to do, Mum, Dad? We can't eat food. And the parents are freaking out because they've been able to live for so long, they wouldn't know how to till the land for food anyway.
This promised land wasn't looking very promising.
But I digress. Every man praying or prophesying, having his head covered, brings shame to his head. What does that mean? Every man who prays or prophesies outside the will of Yahweh is in trouble. Every man that says that God told them to do something and that he didn't tell them to do something is in trouble. So if you're covering Messiah and you're praying, Susanna, I'm having a vision for you. Life is going to get a lot better for you next year. It's going to be amazing. You're going to move to France. You're going to become a famous painter. Now, firstly, that better be Yahweh's will. That better be what Yahweh sees her doing. And secondly, if it is what Yahweh's got planned for her, should I be telling her this? That's what a lot of people don't realize. Sometimes the Heavenly Father will depart information to you. It's not always for you to tell everyone.
That's right. Yeah.
So you have to find out whether you should actually tell Susanna that she's going overseas. In fact, in you doing so could jeopardize the whole thing.
Yeah.
So whatever you do, whether you're praying or whether you're prophesying, and we prophesy sometimes and we don't know it. Most of the time, you know how you prophesy? Is when you're reading the Torah portions and the aliyahs on a daily basis out loud. That's the time when you're most likely to prophesy, is when you're reading from Scripture in the time sequence of the Torah portions. One of the things you'll notice when you follow the aliyah each day and follow the Torah portions, for some strange reason, whatever the subject is of the weekly Torah portion, you'll notice it'll have some sort of relationship with what's happening in your life. And that's the first kind of level of prophecy you become familiar with. And you know what it comes on the back of? Cold hard study of the Torah on a daily and a weekly basis. Sorry. It's not you sort of, oh, I'm in the spirit today. Don't worry, that's nice, but it comes on the back of cold hard study every morning. So you get there. Yes, you do get in the spirit. You can get swept up by the spirit. Yes, the Holy Spirit can plant you on the ground, or it can levitate you, or raise you up, or make you glow, or make you have insight, make you see through walls, or protect you, or cause other people to die, or cause other people to be resurrected. Yes, the Spirit can do all those things. But what is the cold, hard yards of the study of the Torah? How are you going with that? One of the most dangerous things is studying what itch you've got. You know, we're told never to actually teach people, scratch a person's ear when we teach. So my job, and Tom's job, and a good teacher's job is not to tell you things to make you come back next week. In fact, what we should be telling you is the truth, and whether you want to come back next week or not, it's up to you. Scratch the ear, tickle the ears. I can't remember the verse. So that's the thing. That's the thing. So, you know, but we're to do it with a soft countenance. A gentle answer turns away wrath. A brother offended is harder to win like the strongest tower. I think that's from Proverbs. I read 14 chapters of the book of Proverbs 2 days ago, and I'm blaming someone in this room. Just read 14 chapters straight, the book of Proverbs. Download. Very good. I was always a big Proverbs fan. I think Proverbs is one of the most overlooked books.
Yeah,
You're a big Psalms fan, you read Psalms every day, good on you. Proverbs has got a lot of gems in it. Okay, every woman praying or prophesying with her head uncovered brings shame on her head. For that is one and the same if it is is the same as if her head was shaved. So basically, if the woman is praying or prophesying and it's not in accordance with what her husband's doing. Sometimes you can get a woman in a relationship, she's got a bit of a spirit of rebellion. And maybe the man's a little bit anemic. Maybe the man's got a few shortfalls. Maybe he's not has a stronger faith as his wife. But it's his wife's role, even if she's got a stronger faith, to bring her husband up and strengthen him. Women who are in a relationship that do have a stronger immune than a man, it'll only work to your detriment if you keep becoming a bodybuilder in the spiritual realm and your husband just keeps going like that. Stop going to the spiritual gym, and your job is to get him to come up go to the spiritual gym. Do you know what I mean? So if you've got strong faith, strong immunity, and you're in a relationship with somebody, then your job is to try and get them interested. You know what you do? You sit there with the scripture and you go, oh man, have you read this? Come and have a look at this. And you just share them a piece of scripture and go, what do you reckon about that? Ask them their opinion, ask them, and show a little bit of enthusiasm in the text, and call them over and go, wow, this is amazing, come and have a look at this. And share stuff that you find out with your spouse or with your friend. Share them. So I found this out today, this is amazing, it's going to blow your mind. Come and have a look at this. Let's go for a coffee, I want to show you, this is amazing. Because they see that you're excited about it, and they'll get excited about it too. And that's going to strengthen their faith. As I was telling Ian this morning, you strengthen your faith by listening to teachings as much as you can, studying the Word as much as you can, talking about the Word, mulling over the Word as much as you can. It waters your spirit, and you get strong faith. That's why some days you're tired, some days you don't feel like you can do good teshuvah. You just don't have the energy to come to Yahweh and say you're sorry, and do what you know you have to do to be cleansed. I had a mikvah yesterday afternoon. I had a mikvah in my home. Filled the bath up and immersed myself 3 times. It's good to do that. You know, okay, you don't have a bath, well, you can do it in a shower. It's good to cleanse yourself. So you're not having a shower with soap. Before you turn on the shower, you go, Heavenly Father, this isn't a normal shower. I want to go in the shower and I want the waters of this shower to cleanse me. I'm not going to use any soap, but I want to be fully cleansed. So you go into the shower, you stand in the shower, you say bracha. I've got the bracha here, I'll show it to you today. You step out of the shower, and then you step back in the shower and say the bracha, next part of the bracha. Then you go out of the shower, and then you go into the shower the last time, and if you can, you get into the fetal position, like you're being reborn, and then you go like that. And then you step out of the shower, and you just had a mikvah. Now people are going to criticize me for saying that and say, oh, you can't have a mikvah in a shower. You can if you've got no other thing around to do it. And it is every congregation's responsibility to raise money to build a communal mikveh that anybody can come to at any point in the week and have an immersion. Being immersed doesn't happen once in your life when you become born again. You can get immerse yourself 5 times a day if you want. But it's every congregation's, whether you're a Jewish congregation or a Messianic congregation, to raise funds, raise money for a communal mikveh. And so basically it's a shower with all the amenities that you need to go to the bathroom, and then they have a mikveh tank, and you have 7 steps that go down, and there's a reason there's 7 steps. You immerse, the bracha is actually, the blessing is written on the tiles. So you read the blessing off the tiles, and then you come out, you wash yourself, and then you go and you do your prayers, or you go to work and do whatever you do. So as a congregation, that's what we should be able to provide for you guys. Some of you might have the ability to build one on your property, but it's what the Jews do. But this is where some of the jealousy comes into it. This is why some people don't want to be like the Jews, because we get a bit jealous of them because they've been around for thousands of years and we've only just re-emerged in the mid-90s. And so we look at how slick the Jews have got everything down with their nice synagogues, and we're meeting in lounge rooms and in civic centres. And sometimes people get a bit jealous of that. And there's a bit of rivalry going on. That's why sometimes people don't like Jewish stuff, because I don't like the Jews, they won't accept us, they won't accept Messiah. And they take it personally that they won't accept Messiah. So what am I getting at with Corinthians 11? He's using symbolism here, and he's using the anatomy as a form of symbolism. He's not talking about the fact that a man can't cover his head. There's other interpretations, but the main thing is here, he's talking about a hierarchy of process of serving the Heavenly Father. That a man needs to know his place. Yeshua needs to know his place in Yahweh. Yeshua had to go through an ordeal to bring him in line. Not that he was out of line, but he had to go through a series of trials to make sure that he was always going to be looking to the Father to lead him. As a man, we have to do that, and as women, we have to do that as well. You have to do that as well. Isn't it interesting? Now, there's more debate that's gone on about it, talking about, though it's speaking symbolically of hierarchy, that it's also speaking literally about the head and about the condition of the head. But as it opens, when in the verse where it says, every man praying or prophesying down over his head, having anything shames the head of him, that's the actual mechanical translation. What down over his head? So the Greek word is katar. So if you translated what Shaul says, it's saying not something covering his head, it's saying something hanging down over his head. If you get a chance this week, go online and study the prohibition against wild hair. There's a thing called wild hair.
Long.
And it's not necessarily long hair, because it's not forbidden to have long hair. A Nazarite can have long hair, a woman can have long hair. It's called wild hair. And there are some parts in the Mishkan that if you go into them with wild hair, you're subject to the death penalty. Did you know if you take off your head covering in certain parts of the Mishkan, you incur the death penalty? And if you have wild hair, you incur the death penalty. And if you have a menstrual issue, or you have not mikvahd after a seminal emission, you incur the death penalty. If you go in certain parts of the Mishkan, it's pretty full, and Yahweh's pretty serious.
So Yahweh gets a man growing long hair. So
He's not against long hair. Nazarites have long hair.
Yeah.
Samson had long hair from birth. He never had his hair cut for his entire life, except when his enemies cut it off. It's not a sin to have long hair. Women can have long hair, Nazarites can have long hair. But it is a sin to have what's called wild hair. Wild hair. I'm not talking about long hair, I'm talking about wild hair. It's hair that's not looked after. It's hair that's not been trimmed, it's not been cleaned, and it's called wild hair. Where all the Kohanim were instructed to keep themselves well groomed. The beard had to be well groomed. The hair has to be well groomed. Did you know who wants to? I asked everybody to put up their hand about you want to get close to Yahweh. The reality is, the closer that you want to get to Yahweh, the more restrictions have to be put upon you. Did you know that's the reality? And not many people will teach that. The closer you want to get to the Heavenly Father, the more restrictions you have put on you. I'll describe it to you in another way. The Kohen Hagadol, when you see what he has to do on Yom Kippur, you'll have a heart attack. Because on Yom Kippur, he has to go into that room from another planet and be in that room for 10, 20 minutes, it's another environment. It's not an earthly environment when he walks in the mercy seat. And so he has to go through months and weeks of preparation. Even the night before, he's not even allowed to sleep. You know why the Kohen Hagadol can't sleep the night before Yom Kippur? Because when you sleep, you collect impurities on yourself. That's why you have to have mikveh in the morning to wash yourself of the impurities when you're asleep. Because being asleep is like being dead. And when you're dead, your body begins to rot and decay. And when you've been asleep a whole night, these impurities, these spiritual impurities settle on you because you're vulnerable. You're not thinking, you're unconscious. And so in the morning, it's a process of cleansing yourself and getting yourself in a state to be ready for prayer.
Because you have dreams, which in other words.
Yeah, you can have dreams. All sorts of things happen when you're asleep. And that's why when you go to sleep, you have to prepare yourself for the world to sleep. And you have to sit down and say a prayer before you go to sleep. And it better be a proper prayer where you're concentrating, not just going through the motions. It's got to be something, dear Heavenly Father, please prepare me the world to sleep. Yahweh, who lays me down to sleep in peace. Please illuminate my eyes lest I die in sleep, for as you illuminates the pupil of the eye. Please forgive me for whatever sin I've done, whatever transgression. I forgive anyone who sinned against me, whether they sinned against my property, my body, my honor, anything of mine. I forgive every Israelite or every Jew. May no man be punished because of you, me. May no man be punished because of me. May it be your will, Yahweh, that I may sin no more. Whatever sins I've done before you, may you blot out your abundant mercies, but not through suffering or bad illness. May the expressions of my mouth and the thoughts of my heart find favor before you, Yahweh, my rock and my redeemer. Dear Heavenly Father, I pray that you appoint guardian angels to watch out over my son Joshua, my daughter Hannah, and myself while we sleep. And I pray these things in the merit of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah. And some sort of prayer along those lines, because you're preparing yourself for your body to enter into another stratosphere. Because when you go to sleep, your neshama is taken up into the heavenlies, and you write down a diary of what you did that day, and you don't leave anything out. You write every single thing you thought or did, and everything. So you're writing your own daily diary. Your neshama is writing your own daily diary of what you did. That's why it's a good thing to do before you pray, before you go to sleep at night. Think about what you did today, what you thought, what your actions were. Anyway, getting off the subject. David H. Stern from the Jewish New Testament commentary, I think I've got a slide here. He writes, and this is back in 1996, but this is his perspective, and he was the author of the New New Testament. Every man who prays in public worship meetings or prophesies wearing something down over his head. This is a literal translation, and it's used here to show that Shaul is talking about wearing a veil, not a hat. So one interpretation is that it's a woman's veil. So it's believed that they're talking about, Shaul is talking about spiritual hierarchy and cross-dressing, how it's something that we shouldn't do in the faith. The usual translation with head covered obscures this fact. As a result, an issue has arisen in Messianic Judaism that should never have come up at all, namely whether it is proper for a Messianic Jewish man to wear a kippah, a skull cap, or a Yiddish yarmulke in public places. Of course, it is proper, since objection to it is based only on a mistranslation of this verse. Okay, so I hope I've gone over Shaul's discourse in 1 Corinthians 11. If you've got any more questions about that, you can ask me over a meal a bit later. But it is not talking about him wearing a head covering. It's either talking about hair, a veil, and it's done using that symbolism to talk about the hierarchy of a man, a woman, a man, Messiah, and then finally Yahweh, the level of hierarchy of authority. Okay, the next one is it's Jewish. I don't want to wear a kippah because it's Jewish. And as I've put up there on the slide, there is no other distinctive Jewish form of attire more recognizable than a kippah. You can walk into a supermarket with these hanging down, and no one will say anything. You might get somebody come up and say, "Man, you've got your shirt's coming undone." But if you wear one of these, the whole supermarket or anybody in the supermarket that sees you is immediately going to think you're Jewish.
That's right.
And friends that you knew The day prior, the next day, you turn up with a kippah to the supermarket, to the plaza, man, you can see it's totally different. As an experiment, I dare you, I'm not daring you, but I am daring. But just, if you're a man, put a kippah on and go to the place where you usually shop, your local town, and see what happens. It is over the top. And you'll kind of see, you might see people that don't like Jews, they'll come out, you'll see in their face, you'll see in their eyes. Or you'll see people who have got loving hearts that you may not have thought, they've given them much thought, and they'll be like, wow, this is amazing. Some people actually react positively to it. But it's certainly going to make your conduct change. Okay. Yeah, I've just basically said that. I want to read that again. So many Messianics do not like Jews. That's a fact. In most cases, it's just jealousy over being part of a newly re-emerging movement facing up to the reality that the Orthodox Jews have thousands of years of refinement in their faith. They have established synagogues, mikveh houses, millions of volumes of insightful ancient and modern Torah-based literature. They have yeshivot, houses of study all over the world, sophisticated global apostolic programs, and most of them know the Hebrew language, versus small groups of ex-Christians with strings tied to their belt loops, sitting in living rooms and arguing over just about everything you can think of in the scriptures. A lot of people have a jealousy towards the Jews because of what I just told you. They have all this wealth of synagogues and all these resources, these mikveh houses, these great houses of study. They're dressed in a uniform way. Sure, the Jewish Orthodox Judaism has its issues and problems and its various things they contend with, every religion does. But then you have the Messianic faith that really only emerged in the mid-90s. Most people are still meeting in living rooms. Most people are dressed just about every different way you can think of. Hardly anybody can agree on the pronunciation of the Creator's name and His Son's name. People can't agree on whether all the Torah is done away with or some of it's done away with. Just, you name it, we can have disagreements in the Messianic faith over anything. And when you stack that up against Judaism, we look like a mess. And so what happens is you get Messianics, they begin to have a jealousy of Jews. And they go, we don't have to please the Jews. We can do our own thing. They don't know everything, and it's like, whoa, okay. They're the only nation to have kept the Torah throughout all the centuries, and they've basically been beaten to a pulp. Do you know what the Romans did? The Romans killed thousands upon thousands of men, women, and children, Jewish men, women, and children, and the bodies weren't rotting. They were trying to bury the bodies, and there were still thousands upon thousands that they couldn't bury, and they were so righteous that their bodies wouldn't rot in the sun, and they didn't start to smell. So you know what the Romans did? They made fences out of them and walls out of the bodies. So they decided, well, they don't smell, we'll use them as fences. So, that's what the Jews had to put up with. So it was a miracle. Yahweh made a miracle, and He wouldn't allow their bodies to rot or decay until they were buried. The Romans saw that as an opportunity to use them as cheap resources to build walls and stuff. So the walls were literally made out of dead Jewish bodies of men, women, and children.
Resurrection time.
There's a lot of people that are dreading the day of Yahweh, let me tell you.
Come to life.
Yeah.
They'll walk out. Sorry.
In some cases, the rejection of outwardly Jewish practices such as the Kippah, observing Hanukkah, anything rabbinic, and Israeli flags flying in fellowships comes from plain old anti-Semitism. We've had people that won't come to our service because we fly Israeli flags. Lose the flags and I'll come. Lose the alcohol and I'll come. Lose the liturgy and I'll come. Lose the Hebrew and I'll come. Lose the Kippah and I'll come. You know what? How about I just don't turn up anymore and you turn up?
That's true.
There's no other religion that has to deal with all these things except this faith.
It's amazing. Amazing to keep the faith.
Number 4, it's a tradition, and generally traditions are rejected because many Messianics think about Yeshua rejected traditions. I'm not going to answer that one right now because I'm going to answer that in the first positive aspect of wearing a kippah. Okay, now I'm going to look at the positive aspects of wearing a kippah. Oh, you don't have to see that. All right, the positive aspects. You ready? You want to hear about the good stuff now? All right. Wearing of a kippah does not impede with the observance of any commandment in the Torah whatsoever. So I'm happy to tell you, by wearing one of these, it's not going to get in the way of anything that you will do to serve the Almighty. Traditions that did not obstruct Torah observance were not forbidden. Here's two witnesses from the Nesrim Ketuvim, the Brit Hadashah, the New Testament, that prove that the early apostles also taught traditions, apart from the one I inadvertently read in the 1 Corinthians 11. Here's another two. So if you want to turn to 2 Thessalonians 2:15, next time somebody wants to attack you about traditions, and these two verses are going to get you out of some serious trouble. In fact, they're going to get you out of so much trouble, they're going to put the other person that you're conversing with in the trouble. And they're going to try and they'll want to disengage their conversation with you as soon as possible. So 2 Thessalonians chapter 2 verse 15 says, "Therefore, Israelite brothers, stand fast and hold on to the commandments and the traditions that you have been taught, whether by word or by epistle, by letter." 2 Thessalonians 2:15. Ample enough evidence, that verse alone, to tell us that traditions are also being taught as well as commandments.
Tradition.
The Bible, as I told you, the Bible does not tell you how to keep the commandments. From the book of Genesis to the book of Revelations, there is not much room reserved for how to keep the commandments that Yahweh tells you to keep. You say, okay, thou shalt not murder. Okay, that's pretty straightforward. Thou shalt not lie. Well, if I don't lie, the person's going to be very depressed. There's situations where it's a mitzvah to actually lie. Did you know that? Life-threatening situations, you should lie. If you're lying, will get you out of a life-threatening situation. There's traditions that teach us how to observe the commandments. Did you know that? You shall circumcise. There's no teaching on how to do that in the Torah. You shall write them as a sign upon your arm, and shall write them as a sign upon your head. What?
Write them on your doorpost.
Write what on your doorposts? The scriptures never tell you what to write on your arm or your forehead or your hand or on your doorposts. It comes by way of the oral Torah, which is manifest in its observance through traditions. As I've always said, you can't keep the Torah without also keeping a myriad of traditions along with it. You can be anti-traditional and try and keep the Torah, but I guarantee you're not keeping the Torah properly. Or you're writing your own Mishnah. You're writing your own Talmud. And that's what people essentially are doing when they turn their back on rabbinic writings that tell you about how to keep Torah, mitzvah. You're going to turn your back on thousands of years of wisdom, people that are way more pious and holy than you could ever be, and you're now going to make up your own, and you're ignoring all the giants that have come before you in the Torah. That's crazy. I want to stand on the shoulders of these giants. They did the hard work. Now all I have to do is stand on their shoulders, and I can even be taller than they were in their generation. Because I study what they wrote, the conclusions they come to, the hours they've poured over. Did you know how a Jew studies Torah? They study with no shoes on. They put their feet in a bucket of cold water, and they get their payuts, they get their earlocks, and they tie their earlocks together, and then they tie it to string from the ceiling. So when they fall asleep and they go like that, it pulls the earlocks. I'm not joking, that's how they study Torah.
Now we realise
And they put their feet in cold water and they're just sitting there studying. They're serious. I had earlocks once. I should have done it. Tell you what it's like. But you know, sometimes you come home and I'm too tired. I know I'm straight to bed. You know, and they go, no, I've got to study some more. They're just genuinely interested in it. They're fascinated with it, and they can't get enough of it. Some are doing it the wrong way. Don't get me wrong.
Of course, they're the extreme orthodox.
They're the extreme orthodox.
I mean, not all Jews.
Not all of us. Not all of us will ever be that level, nor can we. But I'm just saying that's what some of them do. It's amazing. I don't find that. I don't have a problem with any of that. I just go, wow, that's amazing. It's like when somebody does a sculpture and it's just, I did this sculpture with one arm while I was asleep. You know, it's like, how did you do that? It's like, wow. I admire that. I admire people that have really put a lot of effort in. You go, oh, well, I think that's legalistic. Well, we don't know. We're going to know eventually one day, but at the moment, they're just putting effort in to try and find out about the Heavenly Father. Why are you so quick to say that they've got bad motives? What is it about you? You're always there to, you're running everyone down if they put in the effort. Come on. All right, number 2. Wearing one in public advertises your faith and will cause you to conduct yourself in a respectful manner. Wearing a kippah in public is an outward revelation of one's true identity. It also is an act of piety and a helpful reminder to live a Torah-infused and Messiah-minded life. It can serve to disguise a bad haircut, double as a toupee to cover a bald spot, or help the versatility challenged Israelite appear taller. Because you can get the ones that are... That last bit was a joke, by the way. Please don't
I
put
was
that in
just
your notes.
thinking
Maxen's writing it in the
that.
notes. Good on you.
Spot.
Wearing a kippah, number 3, wearing a kippah may generate curiosity in a person who might inquire about the faith. Rabbi Alana Nava, he put a kippah on when he went to Darwin, when he was very early on in his walk. But he wasn't observant, but somebody put a kippah on his head and he forgot it was there. And somebody noticed that he had a kippah on and they invited him to some other function, and one thing led to another and he became religious. So had he not opened himself up to let this religious guy put a kippah on his head, because he wasn't observant then, and then he forgot that he had it on, somebody saw it and said, "Oh, come and check this out." And they never would have told him to come and check that out had they not seen it, had he not had a kippah on his head. So his kippah really steered him in the right direction. And I like commandments where you've got to wear stuff, because you know what? It's easy. Once you wear it, you can kind of forget about it and go, "Okay, I've got it on." Every second of the day, I'm performing the mitzvah of wearing tzitzit. You don't perform the tzitzit twice every day, once every day when you put it on, or whenever you put it on, if you go to the gym and then you put it on again. "Oh, I've done it twice today." The performing the wearing of tzitzit is a second by second mitzvah that you're observing. And remember what I always say, you can't obey "thou shalt not murder" unless you want to murder somebody every second of your life and you refrain from it. It's only when you really feel like you want to murder somebody and you refrain from doing that you obey the commandment of not to murder somebody. And most people aren't going to obey that commandment, because most of us in this room have never really wanted to or had an opportunity to murder somebody. And given the opportunity, probably most people in this room would never go and murder somebody even though you felt like it. So you wouldn't get the credit for obeying that commandment of "thou shalt not murder." So I'm telling you, one of the commandments that probably no one in this room will ever do, maybe, or hopefully, will be to refrain from murder, because none of us have felt like that. You've maybe felt fleetingly like it, but you would never carry it out. So none of us would get a tick in the box when we go up to Shemaiah. "Oh, Susanna, I see you've observed the commandment to not murder 5 times. That would have to mean that you actually walked through in your mind and planning somebody's murder, and then you pull out and go, "No, I'm not doing it." It's never going to
So
happen.
you never really have to think about it.
It's never going to happen. Although you can murder somebody's reputation. You can get on social media, and you know what the Heavenly Court will say, may say, heaven forbid, they'll say, "Oh, Ian, we've got you down here as murdering 650,000 people." You go, "What? How's that?" "Oh, back in so-and-so, you said something to a lady, and it caused her such depression that she went on a rampage and killed like so many dozen people, and one of these people that got affected by the rampage, they went on the... And you can trace it all back. Yeah, and it might not be murdering somebody, but it might be their reputation, their livelihood has been murdered. That's the same as murder. In fact, did you know if you shame somebody in public and their face goes red, the person that made their face go red in public is a murderer? In the Heavenly Court, they're deemed the same as a murderer. Because when you shame somebody in public and their face goes red, it's like you've actually drawn blood. So never embarrass someone in public. That's a massive transgression. And never make their face go red, even if you think they deserve it. Because even if they deserve it, but you've perpetuated that they're in that situation, it'll come back to visit you, and you'll be in that situation too, and you don't want to be in that situation. I remember at school, the kids used to pick on me at times, and your face used to go red in front of all the girls in the class. It's some people would prefer to die than public speak. Did you know that? They've done a study, and they found that people would actually prefer to actually die, be killed, than have to get up in front of a group of people and do a public speech. They're that fearful about getting up in front of a group of people. So when you get up there and you're embarrassed and your face goes red, you want to die. I just want to die. There's nowhere for me to go. This is terrible. Get me out of here. Okay, so number 4, all Israel are a nation of priests according to Revelations 1 and 6. The wearing of a head covering by a Jew or a Messianic believer is an outward sign of a believer's constant anticipation and readiness for the bridegroom's return. Isaiah 61:10b says, He has clothed me with garments of Yeshua, He has covered me of salvation, He has covered me with the robe of Zadokah of righteousness, as a bridegroom decks himself with ornaments, and as a bride adorns. Number 5, a head covering is a sign of a changed nature, transformation from uncleanness to purity in Messiah. Zechariah 3:4 and 5, and he answered and spoke to those who stood there before him, Take away the filthy garments from him, and to him he said, See, I have caused your iniquity to from you, and I will clothe you with a change of garments. And I said, Let them set clean turbans upon their heads. So they set clean turbans upon their head and clothed him on his head and clothed him with garments, and the heavenly angels of Yahweh stood by. So Ezekiel is telling the high priest, the disenfranchised high priest Ezekiel, Eshkatel, that this is how they should be attired, aligning with the way one's attired in the Torah. So this is the way you come before you. Referred to
CITC, the seats. And I'm going to show you an illustration of that. Now, it was a death penalty if a priest was uncovered in the temple. Now, based upon Exodus chapter 19, it says that you will be a holy nation and a royal priesthood, speaking to all of Israel, all the tribes, not just the tribe of Levi and the family of Aaron, but they're all priests, not